found your agent after doing the query. I mean,
Yeah.
did it take a while to, as you sent out those queries, you pick and choose? Did you have a bunch come back that interested you? Or?
It was right at that time when there was a new crop of agents that they had websites and they had email, and sort of the old school agents, you had to send them like a big printed manuscript. Um, and I was really more interested in agents that I figured someone that doesn't have a web presence is going to have a hard time negotiating ebook royalty rates. They're kind of
Sure.
distant from that world. And so I had a spreadsheet and I queried 8 agents per day for about 10 days. And the first agent I queried, I got rejected within the hour. It was like,
okay,
used to send out self-addressed stamped envelopes. So when you got that envelope with your handwriting to you, you knew there was a rejection inside. And now you could just get the email like, oh, thank you. And
I'm sorry, did you send them the first chapter, or how?
Yeah,
I know that's different than the publisher, I guess. But.
Yeah, you would send a query letter, and it's basically a one-page pitch. And some agents will want a partial, so they'll send us the first 15 pages or the first 30 pages.
Okay.
And depending on, and there isn't one real standard. Some agents like something different than another agent in that realm. But I actually had 5 offers in 10 days, which
you were 38 years old.
Yeah, that was pretty rare because a lot of people. I always feel bad when I talk about my path to publishing with Hotel, because it was just like falling downhill. It's really easy, but people don't really know that I wrote another book before that, and that's the one that I toiled for years on. And my big struggle was just, it's hard if you have something you worked on for 4 years to just say, nope, I'll put that aside. I'm going to start with this blank page, begin again. But that's what most of us end up doing at some point. But yeah, I had 5 offers. 4 were in New York City. 1 was based in Denver. And I really connected with the one in Denver. And all my friends thought I was crazy to not get a New York agent. But I was following this agent's career, and it seemed to be really on the upswing. And I'm still with her. There's Kristen Nelson, but I think to this date, I think she's had 55 New York Times bestsellers.
Wow.
In 10 years. Wow. 3 of them are mine.
That's impressive.
But yeah, and so people don't think I'm crazy anymore.
Yeah.
She's known in the industry. She's known in New York.
Is there any negotiation with agents, or is it sort of like realtors are 6% basically, or agents 15%, or is that just?
Yeah, agents are 15%. There are some old school authors, like in the 70s, it was 10%. And so there's a lot of authors that their whole career was in the 70s that they, that line will not move. 10%. Yeah, the day you want more, that's the day I get a different agent. And honestly, they would struggle to find one that will work for 10%. Yeah. And it's different. I'm sure Stephen King or J.K. Rowling, they have the power to sort of set the terms. But for me, 15%, it seems like most of the publishers now, they won't look at unagented manuscripts. So you need an agent. I can think of one publisher that you can just mail stuff to and they'll look at it, but that's really an outlier. And so I was happy to sign, and she was the one that pitched it. And she said, I think I know the perfect home for this book. And there ended up being an auction for the book. There was 3 publishers bidding on it, and the person that she thought would be perfect was the one that won the auction. And that was my first editor.
How long do those auctions last? Is it? I imagine it's not like one of the and now go down,
Go the hammer.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine they kind of know how to say it.
It was all done by email. And
really?
And it was done over, I think, 2.5 days. And
so you have some amount of time to get back with your team and talk about it.
And Kristen, she said, here's the floor. If you're not going to come in at this level, then, don't bother. Like, this is what we're looking at. That was her sense of where we would be. And then once there were 3 interested publishers, I got to interview them, which doesn't normally happen. You don't usually get to pick and choose. It happens. I mean, I could probably point to certain books and be like, yeah, that sold at auction and that sold at auction. So it does happen. But for most authors, it does not. So I was really fortunate.
Well, do you ask them like, how would you promote this? I mean, is that what you ask them? Strategic
Yeah.
questions?
And honestly, they wanted to talk about the book. And one publisher, one editor, she really focused on the love story, and another editor really focused on the father-son story. And I could tell what was resonating with them. And the person that I ended up going with, she really got the book. She understood it the way I meant it to be understood. And that person becomes your advocate within the publishing, within your publisher. She's your fairy godmother, basically. And it was good working with her. She was great.
That's interesting. No, these are blurbs, so it's not exactly how they decided to push it. I mean, I guess the illustration shows the boy and the girl. But this Lisa C. Press Bitter and Sweet debut that explores the age-old conflicts between father and son and the depths and longing of the deep-heart love, which doesn't say boy and girl, but I guess it insinuates it. Other than wartime, Chinese-Japanese variation on Romeo and Juliet, obviously love story piece of that. So and I'm sure those are the way loyalties and timeless devotion, the way they decide which blurbs to put on the covers, because that a lot of times that's all people are looking at with it.
Yeah.
Or maybe.
And it's very validating for the author. Like I love Lisa C's work, and then I got the emails that said Lisa C is reading your book this weekend and she loves it. She's probably going to blurb it. It's just I was over the moon. I couldn't believe that this was happening. It's the same when I got the blurb from Pat Conroy. I know now that I think his best friend Bernie Shine. Sorry if I'm sharing his secret. But his best friend Bernie Shine read a lot of those books and blurbed them for him.
So how does and you usually don't pay for the blurbs?
No.
So that would be unethical probably. So, all right. So you start off with the business part of it. You need an agent, so that's 15%. They use their experience to price the publisher's price to buy the rights.
Mm-hmm.
And then what percentages, talk about a little bit how that's shared as far as the book has legs or not.
Yeah. The agent, it's one thing for them to sell your book, but they also, they have someone that's a contract person, and your contract, you might agree in principle in an email and you sign something, but the actual contract might be 60, 70 pages with and publishers will ask for things that they shouldn't ask for, and a good agent will catch those things and be like, okay, you're not going to have world rights. We're going to retain world rights. We're going to sell that elsewhere. Those kind of things. And
because FYI, for example, he just sold the rights in China to his last book separately from the American rights.
Oh, wow.
So
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Mainland China, which was surprising because.
Anyway, go ahead. I interrupted you, but I was saying to make that point that if you don't withhold those, then
and there's kind of an industry standard of if you get in advance, you have to sell enough books to earn back your advance before you collect royalties.
So if you sell I'm not saying this is yours, but just for purposes of, if you sold it for $100,000, they need to make $100,000.
Correct. And
then you would start participating.
Exactly.
And is that something that's negotiated too, the percent you participate in, or how does that work?
No, I mean that's a byproduct of how much they purchase the book for. So if they purchase it for $10 or $1 million, then you have to earn back $10 or $1 million. But the royalty rate there's kind of a standard. So hardbacks, you'll get this much, and there's usually escalators. I know this is more.
No, I'm interested. What is this much? What is that?
If you sell, if you out earn your advance, then you might get this much more. If you sell 500,000 copies, you might get this much more.
Is
or
that
less.
just straight cash, or is that a percent of each book
It's a
sold?
percentage of each book.
And what does that amount to typically?
It's changed from my first book to the current book because of inflation. Books should cost a bit more. With my first book, a hardback, I would make like on average $3.20 on a book that sells.
So it's
for
based on what the
24.
book was priced at.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the paperback would be like $1.50 or something on a book that sells for 12 or
Yeah.
something.
Okay.
And then there's ebooks. You get a percentage. Audiobooks, you get a percentage, and that's kind of how you make a living. Most books, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's most books published never out earn their advance.
Really?
That's why it's an inexact science.
Do you get paid monthly, annually, quarterly? How often do they?
There's two
catch up?
reporting periods, so it's twice a year's or a royalty reporting period. And my agent has someone that audits those royalty statements, which is very important.
Yeah,
And she's caught errors. One was an error from Amazon, not for me, but one of her other clients, where in a period they sold this many ebooks, and then the next quarter or the next semester the next reporting period they sold the exact number of ebooks. And what's the odds of that? That's an error.
Yeah.
And so they, Amazon, for all their algorithmic horsepower, there are people pushing the buttons, and there was an error there. So it's another reason to have an agent. Also, they're just, some authors rely on their agents for advice and counsel. Some, as far as the book itself, it's very common to have an author who wants the agent to read it and give them feedback. And I really don't.
And that's probably more salability rather than the eruditeness of it, perhaps.
Right. They're not searching it for typos and things, but they're just like, oh, I like this, but I think it would be stronger if you did this and that. For me, I don't do that with my agent. And at her by design for her, she said, now that you have an editor, I don't want to get in the middle of that conversation. If you need me, I'm happy to read and give you all the advice and counsel on story stuff. But your editor is the point person on that, and I'm totally fine with that. So it really goes from me, and then my wife is the first reader, and then I make edits, and then it goes to my editor. That's
also ask, is the editor someone that you have personally, or is it from a publishing house? Or
it is, yeah. The editor is the one that acquires the book. And so I was at Ballantine, which is in the Random House family of publishing entities, and there's probably 5 editors at Ballantine, and there's a budget for acquisition every year, and so those editors are kind of competing. Not really competing, but like, I've got this big book, and this other editor says, I've got this big book, and which one is going to be our lead title, or which one are we going to make the big offer on, or that kind of thing. But that editor becomes your advocate within the publishing industry and within that house, and they kind of ride herd on the publicity plans and the marketing plans, along with the publisher who does that as well.
My daughter worked in New York for a while in the publishing business with an imprint of Random House, somebody in Grouse, something.
Yeah, Farrar, and it's
GRADU is her. I know
Yeah.
the Grouse woman was her closer friend of those two, but anyway, she Kurt, that was before she kind of did the Ruth thing and went with her husband to Texas when he wanted to go to business school. But she enjoyed that part of the bit. She would have loved to kept doing that.
probably so.
Yeah.
What part of the, part of the business, what part of it don't you like that you find challenging?
Ooh.
Besides, finding someone who's going to print your book, but obviously that's not a problem.
The part that
I say print, and then let's just say publish it.
I don't know if it's maybe not dislike is a strong word, something I struggle
Well, you
with.
may be having too much fun, so.
Yeah, well, for me, it's I want to just write independent of these expectations, but once you assign a dollar amount, that can weigh on you. You're like, oh, I'm really passionate about this idea, but it may not sell as well as the previous book, that kind of thing. And it can
Because you get deadlines, right?
You do have deadlines, yeah, but the deadlines are fairly flexible.
Okay.
Like on my
Not
second,
like a newspaper.
Not a hard
no,
journalist.
yeah, and I was a stickler for deadlines because I came out of that world, and I was 4 weeks past my deadline on my second book, and I was at a book festival, and I was talking to some other author and kind of grousing about that. And he said, 4 weeks? I'm 4 years past my deadline. So, I mean, fundamentally, your editor will wait for an outstanding book rather than publish what's not, uh, not great, something that's not your best effort. The book is more important than the deadline. I mean, granted, I wish I was a book a year guy, but I do so much research. It's kind of hard for me to be in that cycle.
Was it Hemingway that said there's no great writing, there's just great editing?
I would disagree there.
Yeah.
I think there's great writing
I don't think
and
it
poor
meant
editing.
by an editor. I meant, or maybe great rewriting. I think not his editor. I think he was.
But clearly, George R.R. Martin could take as long as he wants to write books.
Oh, poor George. Yeah, he's a prisoner of his success. And
10 years and more waiting for the last book.
yeah, I don't think he'll ever finish those books. I don't think
He keeps saying, it'll be here.
he's a discovery author, so part of him, the joy is, ooh, aha, of the writing process, and I'm the same way. And for everything to be known, it's too mechanical. And like it's just kind of I think he would see that as a soul-sucking enterprise to just sort of mechanically assemble this book instead of let it come through inspiration.
As he mentioned at the library, just the wonderful, deserved good fortune of being picked as Jenna Bush's book club, and what that can do, whether it's Oprah or Reese Witherspoon or Jenna to the sales of a book. You might
it really makes it.
that.
Yeah, there's these force multipliers in the industry, and there are big voices. So there was the main book buyer at Costco was a very powerful woman, and if she chose you for her pick of the month, that can sell a ton of books.
How many would that's interesting. I wonder, do you have any idea what Costco would sell in a month of their featured book? Is that right at the checkout counter kind of place?
It really varies from book to book.
Okay.
And so, and unfortunately, well, fortunately for her, but she retired, and so there's a new crew.
I see, but that's interesting. That's a
yeah. If there's and a similar person at Target, a similar person at Barnes and Noble, if they love your book, it will be shelved in certain areas.
Yeah, exactly. Just like groceries.
Yeah, exactly. The merchandising component, and same with Amazon. But what was most important for me was independent bookstores. There are across the country these groups of independent booksellers, Pacific Northwest, the Mountain Plains region, and they're very tight communities. And what I like about indie stores is it's organic, it's real. And at large retailers, publishers can buy shelf space. And they often do that for politicians, they do that for celebrities, and that's how some reality TV star can become a New York Times bestseller. One time, they pay enough to buy enough real estate, and they probably have a PR firm buying their own books, is what politicians do, and that gets them to that category. But independent bookstores, you can't buy them off. They don't sell their retail space doesn't go to the highest bidder. It's what they like, what they think is best for their readers and their community. It's organic and it's real. So it's always nice to hit a bestseller list on whether it's USA Today or the New York Times. But if I'm an IndieBound, which is their organization of indie stores, if I'm an IndieBound bestseller, then I feel like that's legit. It's it's above and beyond reproach. So I like that.
Okay, I'm through it.
Yes, thank you. Well, we'll just take a couple more minutes.
Sure.
Glad to have Jamie Ford in Tupelo with us. Jamie, thank you. You
It's
had
a
a great
pleasure.
day at Tupelo High School today, and then our community Reeves Lee County Library.
And then at the birthplace of Elvis.
Yeah, Jamie was interested in seeing. I think, well, you speak for yourself, but I think you really enjoyed the
So
Tupelo's
nice.
version of Elvis's legacy.
Yeah, I think going to the source is interesting, and I think from a psychological profile,
Yeah.
most people who specialize in child development say our neural pathways are kind of wired in by the time we're 8 or 9 or even younger, and so this is the community. This is the community of church music that informed Elvis's, not just his imagination, but his whole career. And it's really cool to see that. So I geek out over history
Well,
in any context, but this
Your
is really
two
neat.
sons are both in the music
This is
world,
true.
which hopefully they'll get a kick out of your
Oh, yeah.
reporting to be here. And well, one of the things that we enjoy for the Tupelo Reads program is to bring in authors from the different parts of the country to come to Tupelo, come to a small town in Mississippi. In Mississippi, of course, your wife's from Arkansas, but as you know, the South, some do that. But we we take pride, and hopefully it's not too misspent in trying to bring people, whether it's from like New Hampshire a couple years ago, or Minneapolis last year, or Montana this year, into Tupelo, and seeing a progressive small southern town that is interested in literacy and reading and has a great open newspaper. Our newspaper is owned by the community. It was given
Wow.
in 1982, 1978 anyway. It was worth at the time $15 million. Could have been sold to Gannett or anybody. And he set up a foundation, and it's owned by the community.
That's
And the
great.
dividends for years and years went to this community foundation. So we've got a library that's lively and supportive, and so bring people like you in is just another shot in the arm annually for us to do. So thank you for coming.
It's a very vibrant community, and the South has a deep literary tradition, so they kind of go hand in hand. Yeah, I've enjoyed my time here, and the events today were great.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
thanks for coming to
my
Tupelo.
pleasure.
Thanks for coming for Reads, and to all of our fans out there that follow our website and our podcast and things. This is Jamie Ford. The Benny Daughters just continue to rise in popularity around the Hotel Corner Bitter and Sweet. It's on the New York Times bestseller list for over 2 years and still apparently helping Jamie buy birthday presents for his children. Anyway, it continues to sell all over the country and is the book of choice in a lot of schools. We were talking about that at the high school. So we look forward to watching your career continue to bloom, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.